the Distress Center of Ottawa in the region. What's the item carry? Item 3. Thank you. Item number 4 is a traffic stop race data collection project update. So we have the chief's report. Is the item receive for information? Receive. Thank you. Item number 5, Service Initiative Quarterly Update. And we do have a gentleman wish to speak to item number 5. The name is Shane Quinn, so I'll hold item number 5 for the resident to speak. Item number 6, my colleague who had asked for this report has, it's not going to be in the meeting today. Councillor Turney has asked me if we can refer this item till next board meeting. So on a referral, okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll deal with item 6 in the next board meeting. Item number 7, response to inquiry 11604, supplementary training. I believe Member Small, would you like to hold? Item number 7 is hold, and item number 8, response to inquiry 1605, media statement, and also you wish to hold this. Okay, thank you. Item number 9 is outstanding board inquiries in motion for September 2016. Is the item received for information? Received. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Item number 10 is the letters of commendation, Chief's report. So is the item received? Received. Thank you. Other business communication is listed and will respond to item 1, the letter dated August 3, 2016 from the Honorable Stephen Della Duca, the Minister of Transportation, in response to the board letter dated March 22, 2016. As you all remember, this is about the changes to the Highway Traffic Act, subsection 7 of the Highway Traffic Act. So we had received the response for our communication. So on the item received, thank you. So we'll go to our presentation for the 2017, and I believe we have Superintendent John McKenna and Inspector Nolan, Murray Nolan. So, Chief, if you want to, or Deputy, if you want to introduce your team.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, we have a couple of members from the Emergency Operations Directorate here to present to us on 2017. Right now, as of May of this year, we have 3 members who are full-time on 2017. They continue to work collaboratively, not only with our partners in law enforcement, but particularly with the City of Ottawa, to ensure that there's no duplication of any of our planning efforts. With us this evening is Superintendent Joan McKenna and Inspector Murray Knowles. The rest of the team is made up of Staff Sergeant Kevin Kennedy and Sergeant Mark Nethercott. You will see that planning is well underway for the activities to come. Superintendent?
Deputy, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, board members, the purpose of our presentation is to update the Police Services Board on the 2017 security planning. The OPS has identified a number of risks, and we believe the risks are manageable. In this presentation will outline key strategies that we are putting in place to mitigate risk. Just to give you some background, as you know, July 1st, 2017 is Canada's 150th birthday. We have up to 1,200 events scheduled in the City of Ottawa, and we have the potential for 25 large-scale events that may require OPS planning, such as New Year's Eve, the Red Bull Crashed Ice, Yow Ottawa, and the 105th Grey Cup. So that kind of scope is precedent in the National Capital Region. The 2017 OPS project planning team is in place. The team started work in the spring, and we are working with our community partners and security partners. This includes the City of Ottawa's SEAT, which is the Special Events Advisory Team, Paramedic and Fire Services, city traffic and transit, public health, and our policing partners, the RCMP, the OPP, and Gatineau. We've put in place risk mitigation strategies associated with 217 planning. The first strategy is a risk assessment tool. This is an event-by-event risk profile where we have up to 30 factors that we would look at. And this includes the organizer's track record, the type of venue, how many people are expected, is alcohol served or not, the demographic makeup. This will assist our planners now it is assisting our planners now in 2017, which included Canada Day and NOWS, and it will continue to help us with large-scale events. We've also gathered feedback on this tool on events that we have participated and used this tool in 2016 to help improve it for 217 events. The tool provides objective information that allows OPS to advise SEAT whether a permit should be issued or not. We've also developed a staffing tool that will help us to deploy our resources more effectively and efficiently. This will track the complement of available officers, their skill set, their specialized training, whether they're bicycle trained, motorcycle, CEW skill set, or carbine officers. We have a large events that will require a different command structure, which is becomes more complex as the numbers go up. But also, we've introduced a paid duty matrix, which incorporates the new ranks pending the size of the event. It also allows us to prioritize paid duties. So if we need to cancel an event based on the prioritization, we have that established. We have a costing tool that goes beyond just the paid duties hours involved. This will be a true reflection of what the cost of policing that event involves. For example, a big event might require more than 20 hours of planning, which would involve only a couple officers at an 8-hour paid duty. This new tool will capture the time spent on the pre-planning of the event, the operations, and the logistics as well. We will also have further crowd science training. We are fortunate that we have a world leader and an expert in Dr. Keith Still, and he will be coming to Ottawa to deliver training to OPS, to our emergency operations personnel, along with members of the RCMP, the OPP, and representatives of the City of Ottawa to attend a 4-day workshop on crowd dynamics. We also hope to see members of our Police Services Board there as well. It gives an understanding and common language in dealing with crowd capacity identification, dynamics, and flow rates. We've also introduced a Racy Document. This document will standardize a responsibility matrix. The Racy Document will allow us to track who is responsible, who is accountable, who should be consulted, and who should be informed. And when higher level decisions need to be made, this clearly identifies who are the key players. This document is completed for an event-by-event basis, with sign-off from SEAT partners involved and the Ottawa Police Service. We've put in place an operational governance structure. This was modeled on the recent North America's Leadership Summit in June. The 217 OPS planning team involves the Emergency Operations Division and the City of Ottawa SEAT participants. Permits will be issued if risks are addressed using the risk assessment tool. If permits are required and the event is needed, a joint operational planning team will start the planning. So in conclusion, the Ottawa Police Service will meet the City of Ottawa's security needs in 2017. We believe the risks are manageable, and we will continue to seek input from the 2017 executive and municipal leaders. The new tools that we have developed will continue to be used after 2017. Our next steps will be to establish preliminary staffing plans for larger events. We want to confirm our funding models, leverage tools and staffing plans, and move to operational phase in the coming November. And we will continue to work with our city partners. Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Superintendent McKenna, and to your team. We have a couple of questions. Start with my colleague, Member Nicholson.
Thank you very much, Superintendent McKenna. So thank you for this good presentation. With 25 major events, I'm so happy to see you have a costing tool. Have you any idea what extra this is going to cost us this whole year?
So the police will continue to work with our city planners, and as we drill down those events, that will help us determine what policing is going to be required for that event. So that will then help us to establish what a cost would be for each event.
Member Velikat.
You mentioned 1,200 events next year. Are those just 2017 events, or are those the normal events that you also have to patrol?
So that will be a combination. It's above and beyond 217, the number of events that are coming to our plate via the seat table as well. Everyone is informed within the city. They know this is coming, so the sooner we can finalize that calendar will help us plan for our staffing in 2017.
So that includes demonstrations, the normal, regular types of events that you have every year. Does that 1,200 include that, or is the 1,200 over and above what you normally oversee?
So that's over and above. So as we would receive demonstrations, sometimes they come up within a week's notice, 2 weeks' notice. So as we receive them, we will manage them. This is over and above.
Okay, thank you, Member Velikat. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent. This is to Superintendent Fraser. We must have a budget item. I can't refresh my memory for this because with this many events, I listened to the Superintendent's answer, and clearly it's not all going to be paid by event organizers. So there's going to be considerable, I would imagine, extra cost. And do we have a budget item?
Mr. Chair, it's one of the issues that we're just working through the budget process right now. We've got about 4 more weeks of budget planning to do before we finalize our estimates. And this is one of the ones that will be a challenge for us to do 2 things with. And the first thing is finalize the estimates, because it's still one that will probably be uncertain even as we go through the year. And the second is to determine the funding envelope that's required, because we can see that there will be 2 kinds of events. One that is sort of a paid duty nature, where the cost for the event falls squarely to the organizer. And the second kind will be one that is falls to the shoulders of the city and its police service to be responsible for. So we can foresee that there will be some planned activities that cause a one-time expense that will fall to the City of Ottawa. We're trying to come up with what the scope of that might be and what potential funding sources we might draw on, whether it's federal funding, some provincial funding for those activities,
activities, whether it's one-time funding from the city, whether we'll be required to draw on our own reserve funds, but there will be a one-time requirement to fund policing activities as a result of 2017. And part of the budget exercise will be to define that and then make recommendations to the board about how to fund it.
Thank you. So we will have an identified amount.
Correct. That will be part of your 2017 budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Chair, if I could just have one other thing. Not all of the 1,200 events will require policing's presence, and that's how they will be screened through our seat table. And as Ms. Fraser indicated, there will be a number that, if it's a third-party sponsor, would be paid through by paid duties.
Thank you, Superintendent. Member Hunter, Councillor Harder.
Thank you. And just in response to what you're talking about, Vice Chair, the province just announced last week they were giving us, I think, $9 million. I think it was $9 million for the city. So perhaps we can put our ask forward on that. Clearly, I think that the public would be supportive of that. They want, with such a very big year, to have a safe city, and of course, that's our role here at the police services. So that might be a fun. I have a question on the Dr. Keith Still coming from Manchester Metropolitan University. I take it that's Manchester in England, right? When is he coming?
So we don't have the confirmed dates yet, but once we have them, we'll share them with you as well.
But wouldn't we need him here, like in advance of the, pardon?
We have had Dr. Stills here once already, and there was an invitation that went out outside of the police service to city councillors, PSB, to attend, and we're going to do the same process again as the year comes closer. So the training is fresh in people's minds, and he's able to provide that information.
So how are you breaking down the trainer training the trainer? Because obviously you're not having the entire police force go through this, and yet the entire police force at some point during the year is going to be part of the celebrations and part of that responsibility. So have you got a team put together that are everything from constable to superintendent, or?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we've been looking at developing some of our people internally. There's a couple that are going through their academic rigors to become train the trainer. They'll be assisting with the course that's coming in. For the one that we're bringing in, it's more for a lot of our partners that were unable to attend in the last period. The last exercise that we had probably, I'd say, half a dozen RCMP officers. We're hoping to increase that number from their perspective and open up it a little further so that some of our partners have access to this training as well. It's very risk-based decision making. The movement of crowds is not without risk, and we learned a lot last time he was here. We learned a lot of what we do in the past was not necessarily correct. So we've taken a lot of that into our planning this past year, and now we're hoping to spread it around a little bit. So from a train the trainer perspective, we are developing our own internal knowledge and building our competency in that respect. But will we ever be at that level that Dr. Stills is at? No, he's one of the foremost people in the world.
And I'm not looking for that. I mean, that's not something that I would have an expectation, but I would have an expectation that the RCMP, for example, have their own training that they bring to the table, that they would be partners. The OPP brings that. I'm wondering whether you've reached out to Homeland Security in the States, and I was recently in Washington, D.C., so their capital, and let's face it, when they have coming up, whoever the new president, pray God, coming up in January, when they probably have the inauguration, that will be right in National Mall. They have a ton of experience. They have 27 different police forces. I mean, rather than bring some guy in, which he's the expert and all that kind of stuff, I think there's some very close by experience at a capital city level that we should be using that as well. Are we doing that?
We were unsuccessful in getting that type of training. So this was the best fit for us in the past.
So,
and we let the chief answer that one.
Mr. Chair, I just want to reassure the board that actually Ottawa is looked upon as one of the premier leading police services in managing events in Canada. because of the nation's capital, because of the number of events that we plan on a regular basis, and the success we have in working in an integrated fashion with our partners. We're just adding some additional training for command level. So Dr. Sill is targeting our commanders with respect to understanding how to manage and move crowds around. And we've had a lot of success in all the events that we've had. So I think this is just an added component that we want to layer on to training our people and giving them the right tools.
Okay, I have another question on the, what does beyond paid duty hours mean? Beyond paid duty hours? Does that mean getting ready for the paid duty hours? And just, or is that, are we looking for a component basis of volunteers, or what? I just don't know what that term means.
So what that is referring to is some events require pre-planning. So if it's a larger scale event, there's hours that go into planning that event for the deployment, especially in a large number where you need a large police presence.
Okay, so, and then, sorry, I have like one or two other questions. So I have recent experience, and probably the same thing goes, where we have large amounts of construction around the city. We have a tough time getting paid duty officers as it is. I have seen on Woodruff Avenue some OPP that are clearly doing the paid duty. I recently, well, last week, we had to go ahead without having paid duty on Fallow Field at Maryville, where we had to, where there was a mistake done in the construction, and they were reaching out, but we're not successful in getting anyone to volunteer. So I guess my concern is we're going to have all the regular stuff that goes on in the city anyways, which we need that for. How are we going to manage that when it's difficult to get paid duty now? What's it like? What's the plan?
Let's let the chief answer this one. Chief?
I'll start, and then I think right now 2016 is abnormal year with the amount of construction that we're having, so we are having some challenges in filling out the paid duties from a capacity perspective. 2017, you won't see the same level of construction requirements for paid duty officers, so hopefully that will alleviate and we'll be able to manage the events. But capacity, that's why we're going through the exercise now as far as that matrix and understanding all the events that were taking place and being able to map the events, the security requirements, and police involvement, and matching our capacity and seeing if we're challenged, if we need to access outside resources. So it is on our radar as far as from a capacity perspective and being able to deliver, and it'll be about prioritizing what we can and what we can't do.
Yeah, well, we all know that we're definitely will be sterilizing the landscape of construction in the downtown area, but we're a very large city, and we have a lot of projects going on, and they'll be continuing over the next few years. So I'm just raising that as a concern, and I want to make sure that we'll be able to manage that, and if we don't, what's our plan in doing so? Where do we get those people to do that? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Member Harder. Any other question to our staff? No? Thank you very much, Superintendent McKenna and Inspector Nolan. Thank you. Thank you, folks. On the item received, thank you. We do have the Chief's verbal report. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to begin my verbal report with a short discussion on body-worn video. We are seeing a growing desire from members of the public and police officers for the advancement of this type of technology in frontline operations. Just 2 weeks ago, the Toronto Police Service reported details of its own pilot project. Overall, the results are positive, and now Toronto is looking at beginning an RFP process that, if approved, could result in a service-wide deployment. The Ottawa Police Service has had a small team of officers following this issue closely and monitoring the developments across Canada and here in Ontario. We're going to expand that effort and begin the necessary work for the development of options for a pilot project here in Ottawa. While there's a growing interest in body-worn video, there are still a number of challenges that need to be resolved. These include development of policies and procedures, identifying and obtaining the correct IT solutions and support, and costs. The good news is that these issues are being discussed and addressed. The technology is improving and efforts are being discussed that could bring costs down and allow all Ontario police services to participate. So at this time, there isn't any funding in the 2017 draft budget for body-worn video. but we will continue to follow the developments relating to this issue as we prepare a report for the board for approval of a pilot project. We expect that report to come to the board in 2017. It'll discuss the options, the costs, the timelines, the challenges relating to moving forward with this type of technology. Speak a bit about back to school. Our traffic unit and our neighborhood officers have been busy conducting enforcement in school zones since late August. In particular, traffic officers were looking for speeding in school zones, failing to stop, and failing to yield to pedestrians at school crossings. In the first week of the enforcement alone, over 290 tickets were issued. With the return of students to our city, members of our district unit also focused on safety and nuisance complaints in the area near post-secondary institutions. Our Central District neighborhood officers worked with the city bylaw, OC Transport Special Constables, the AGCO inspectors to first educate returning students about city bylaws and other legislations. They then teamed up to enforce those same bylaws and legislations. This type of enforcement addresses a number of common complaints we receive each and every year. It's an important element of our back-to-school transition for neighborhoods near post-secondary institutions, and I thank them for their hard work. Another area called the Jacobs. So this summer, we had the pleasure of meeting two very special young men from our community who both happened to be named Jacob. In June, we met Jacob Demers-Barrett, a 16-year-old with Down syndrome who's always dreamt of being a police officer. And in August, 11-year-old Jacob Gauthier, who has had a tough battle with cancer, who was introduced to us by Councillor Brockington. Both boys had a full day of policing excitement, from station tours to simulated police operations. We're very happy to grant them the wish of both of these individuals, and in addition, we're excited to report that Jacob Gauthier found out on July 22nd that he is now cancer-free. So I think the experience of both Jacobs really moved a lot of our members who were involved in those activities, and I thank them for their work with Jacobs, both of them. Dealing with homicides. Our major crime unit continues to investigate 2 homicides that occurred this past weekend. While they're not related, they both involve people known to our service, and both involve the use of firearms. The deaths highlight the continuing issue posed by criminals with illegal firearms in our community. Our officers have been responding to the ongoing complaints at the Suya Spot restaurant on Shillington Avenue since it opened 3 years ago. We've had almost 100 calls for service at that location. Offenses investigated by our service include public intoxication, illegal selling of liquor, theft, careless use of a firearm, assault, and weapons and drug offenses. The location has become a magnet for criminal activity and should be shut down. We've been working with City Bylaw, Alcohol and Gaming Commission, and the Ottawa Fire, and charges have been laid on the business owners under various provincial acts. We've also worked to oppose a liquor license for that location. I can tell you that that location does not have a liquor license. However, there are obviously continued violations of serving after hours. We will continue to work with our partners and the community to deal with this ongoing concern, and we've heard very loudly from the community that they are sick and tired of having that location open in their neighborhood, as are we. So we will continue to work with our partners. Speak to a dog attack. Our patrol officers are often put into situations where they have to make quick decisions to keep people safe. I want to recognize an example of that and some excellent work done by a member of our Central Patrol Unit. On Friday, Constable Japheth Mazaruka was on patrol in the Wiggins private area of Sandy Hill when he came upon a large, aggressive Bull Mastiff Rottweiler mix running through the housing community. The dog attacked a man holding his 1-year-old son. Both the man and child fell to the ground as the dog continued to bite the man. At one point, the man was separated from the child. Constable Mazaruka attempted to distract the dog and placed himself between the dog and the victim. Fearing the dog would continue his attack, the officer discharged his firearm, killing the dog. The man suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and the young boy sustained minor injuries to his forehead due to his fall. I know this one has been in the media a lot, and I have no doubt that Japheth most likely saved the life of that young boy from a vicious attack, so I congratulate him for that work. Some other great news, as you will have heard, Inspector Pat Flanagan received the Order of Merit through the Governor General's Office. Pat's nomination was accepted in 2015, and was recently acknowledged at the Governor General's residence and received this award. So congratulate Pat. Pat's in the audience there, so congratulations, Pat. And we've also had a number of promotions in our police service, and those senior officers who are promoted are here in the room tonight. Inspector Joan McKenna was promoted to the rank of superintendent, Paul Johnson and Steve Bell as well, and we had Staff Sergeant Jamie Dunlop promoted to the rank of inspector. So congratulations to all those others who aren't here, but those that are in the room as well. Mike Laviolette as well. I'm sorry, Mike. Sorry. Pat was hiding you there. So finally, yesterday, police officers from across Canada gathered in Ottawa to mark the Canadian Police and Police Officers Memorial. Sadly, there are now over 860 names on the memorial on Parliament Hill. They remind us of those who have sacrificed their lives serving their communities and the dangers of police work. I want to thank the organizers for the great work that went into this important event, for helping us remember the fallen. I also want to recognize the Ottawa police officers and civilians who attended or participated in the 460-kilometer run and 700-kilometer ride to remember from the Ontario Police College to Ottawa, and they rode in on Saturday, and we greeted them on the Hill with pride. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That is my report.
Thank you, Chief. Before I turn over to Mr. Vice Chair, I just want to add my congratulations to Inspector Pat Flanagan, and also congratulations to all the folks promoted. Chief, maybe in the future we can receive a report from you and your staff with the promotion, just to receive it, so we'll have them with their name, and they change from inspector to superintendent and others. So just it'll be for our record for future.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you do receive that report on a quarterly basis. It forms part of our workforce management report, where it includes all the promotions, the hires, the resignations, and the significant transfers.
So that was
we can highlight that as well.
That would be great if we can. And congratulations to all the promoters. Mr. Vice Chair.
Chief, I'd like to just talk a little bit about Shillington and your comments. And as you described, the community there is obviously fed up. I think that people in general, even outside of Shillington, who don't even know where it is, are alarmed. And when you describe that one particular area, which is ostensibly a cesspool of crime, whereas you said you had, even now in the store that has had liquor removed, it's being sold after hours. I'm always mystified that with the resources that we have, that we couldn't have somebody literally full-time there, because there's been a lot of other activity. We know it's a drug-infested area. This murder was just one more example of it. That despite our best efforts, there almost seems an inability to stop it. And I'm not naive to the point that there would not be, that crime is going to go away. But I would like to think that when we have a certain hot spot like that we would, and we have the Guns and Gangs unit, I appreciate that we wouldn't devote extra special effort to the point of even having a police officer standing outside that store. It is a confined area. If necessary, for a period of time, for 24 hours a day, I'm not a police officer, I don't pretend to be one, and I admire them greatly, but I think, like the community, get frustrated with our inability at times, our seeming inability to allow these thugs to create the issues that they create. I'd be interested in your comments, please.
Mr. Chair, our neighborhood officers, our patrol officers, drug unit officers, guns and gangs, do pay a lot of attention, and we've invested a significant amount of time in that specific address because of the complaints, because of the challenges we've had. We have a legal framework that we have to operate within, and I mentioned the fact that where our officers are being subjected to allegations of harassment around the work that we're doing in that location. So we're faced with that allegation and that pushback from whether the business owners or the ones that are there. We're still determined to continue working with our bylaw partners. We don't have the ability to shut a place down. We don't have that legal authority to say you shall not operate. Under the city licensing framework, they may have more powers than we do. We've brought even the fire department in to do fire code violations. They wouldn't allow us in. We had to use the tactical unit to breach the door to allow the fire department to do their work, but that requires some form of authorization as well. So it's been a very frustrating location to work on, to deal with, and we're, hopefully through the attention that this recent homicide has brought, there will perhaps be more attention put to the matter and more pressure from the community for the city and ourselves to work harder at shutting down this place and to prevent that criminal activity. To post an officer out there 7/24 isn't very realistic. That's why I think the team effort that we've applied has proven effective, but for some reason or not, we're struggling. We're having some challenges with this particular location because of the illegal operations and the limitations that we have with respect to the laws we have. Deputy, you've got anything? A lot of the work has been done in the operational world by Ed Keeley's work.
Well, I think we have to be realistic and practical in the sense that this is one address in one general vicinity that's causing us lots of problems. Staffing pressures have been what they are in the organization and make it even more difficult to address a lot of the issues that we'd like to address. And I think it's about having to try and respond as best we can with the staffing challenges that we have to the addresses that are causing us the most problems. It may actually be that we're at a point in time, I think, where we have to focus entirely our efforts on those specific addresses that you're referring to, Member Durrell, and not try and be all things to all people. I guess present some of the challenges that we're faced with. Be more focused, I think, on those addresses that create us the biggest risks, the biggest problems, and devote our energies to those communities so that we can help support the law-abiding people that live there to the best of our abilities.
I'm happy to hear you say that, Deputy, because I think that the policing that we do citywide, for the most part, is highly effective. We live in what I think is, for a community its size, a very safe community. But we have these very small particular areas, and in my estimation, what we're doing presently is not working there, and that I'm happy to hear you say that we should reevaluate it, and I'm respectful of the resource issue, but there are quieter, calmer areas of the city that in times like this, I think we could probably remove some people, appropriate extra resources to those, because we've all acknowledged it's not a nice area, and it's not going to get any better until we actively go in there and clean these thugs up. You have my blessing to do so. Thank you.
Within the law, right? Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other question to... Okay, Member Velikat.
I'm curious why you can't arrest the business owner. Is it complicated?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
I was asking why, I don't understand why we can't arrest the business owner.
Well, we've laid charges, and those are before the courts. We're dealing with the landlord, and there's some complications with respect to the lease that are problematic for us and problematic for the owner as well, which are posing some significant problems from an eviction perspective. So we're looking at all those avenues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Velikat. On the Chief verbal report, received. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And we go to item number 5, Service Initiative Quarterly Update. And I would like to call Mr. Shane Quinn from the Civic Hospital Neighborhood Association to take your seat, please. And you have 5 minutes, Mr. Quinn, to address the board. So please go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
I won't need 5 minutes. It's very generous. I'm here because I represent the Safety Committee on the Civic Hospital Neighborhood Association, but I'm also here on behalf of other associations, notably Hintonburg Community Association, Mechanicsville Association. And I would just like to pose a few questions. One of them is, when will the terms of reference and the makeup of the advisory committee be made public? The second question would be, when and how will the evaluation on the changes happen? And the third and final question is, what is the communication plan for all of these changes? That's the sum of it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll ask Deputy Chief Skinner to answer your question. Deputy?
Well, fortuitously, a member of Alacat and I met this afternoon with Acting Superintendent Mark Ford in relation to the Community Advisory Group. The plan is to, we have a draft terms of reference, but we don't believe that we are the best to determine what those terms of reference actually look like. We believe that the committee itself will drive what those terms of reference look like. So the plan is to hold our first meeting in early October, and that first meeting will be a relationship rapport building, provide those terms of reference to the committee members. The committee members will go back home, speak to their representative agencies or community associations, and then the second meeting, it will be about working through those terms of reference to ensure they incorporate as many people's perspectives as possible. Presently, the committee, the group, Community Advisory Group, looks to be about 21 members. We are still reaching out to various organizations, agencies, and community associations, BIAs, to ensure adequate representation. We are not selecting the people. We're actually allowing each of those agencies, groups, to select an appropriate representative, somebody who is informed of policing, is willing to participate, and is willing to be collaborative and a consensus builder. At the end of those first couple of meetings, the terms of reference will be available actually through the Police Services Board. A member of Alacat will be a participant on the Community Advisory Group, and the minutes of each of the meetings will be reported back to the PSB, and a member of Alacat will be available to provide context to those minutes to any of the members of the board who are interested in additional information. Does that answer your first question? Your second question was when will the evaluation take place? We are presently determining what those performance measures look like. We will continue to build those until they represent what it is that we're trying to achieve. Obviously, some of them are financial savings, but it's also about partnerships, being more efficient, more effective, and providing a much improved service. So each of those goals will have performance measures that will be identified in 2017. And as you may know, the Police Services Board receives an update from us quarterly on the SI and the achievements to date. For instance, today we began training our Ottawa Police Strategic Operations Center members. So we have watch commanders, constables, and crime analysts who are preparing to open the OPSOC. In about 3 weeks, we will do a media launch with those folks once they're trained and better able to perform their duties. One of the things that we have told them is we are seeking people who are innovative and are able to think outside the box. We are providing them the foundation or the beginning structures, and our expectation is they will continue to develop and improve on what that OPSOC is able to provide. Really, it's about being a virtual backup to our frontline members. And as Member Durrell spoke about, it's being able to reallocate those resources to the areas that we need them. We are able to see those trends on a more proactive, a more real-time picture, and then we're able to reallocate those resources more efficiently.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I hope that helps you, Ms. Quinn, and
Could I
please
just
keep
ask
in touch.
what resources you're referring to when you say allocation of resources?
Police resources.
These resources to the media
various-
launch, to the media launch and the communications
No, I'm
plan?
sorry.
or-
The OPSOC is responsible for allocating police resources in the city.
What is OPSOC, may I ask?
Mr. Quinn and Deputy, it's okay. If you need to ask more questions, you can ask the Deputy after. I need to continue with the board meeting. So we took your questions, and we'd like to move on with our board meeting, please. On the item, any other question on the item before we receive? Thank you very much, folks. And feel free to talk to the Deputy after, sir. Item number 7 is response to inquiries number 11604, supplementary training. Member Smallwood had asked this item to be held. Member Smallwood?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the question I had asked, there was some comment that it was as a result of some activity that had occurred in Ottawa, and I wanted to make it very clear that this had nothing to do with anything in Ottawa. I have the greatest respect and admiration for the frontline officers and senior management. This inquiry came as a result of a report that I had read that was released by the Ontario Ombudsman Paul Dubé in June of 2016. And a couple of the items in that report really stood out for me. And in fact, he makes a comment in his report that his report is not in any way critical of policing, but rather their training. He mentions that Ontario has the shortest course in Canada, if not in North America, in terms of de-escalation, and that within Ontario there is a very high disparity between the various training programs that go on in various municipalities. One thing that I was very pleased about when I read in his report is that he mentions that amongst the various training policies that are in place across the country, one of the best is in BC, and I noticed in the answer that I received that we actually use the BC model. So I had a couple of questions as a result of that, and one was, I'm assuming that when we use a different term in the answer than they use, but I'm guessing it's the same. The term that he uses is CID training, and I'm guessing that's the same as what we do. Specifically, he mentions that the training consists of an online course that takes 3 to 4 hours, and then it's followed up with 7 hours of in-class training. So I guess I'm wondering, I'm assuming that that is the same model that we are following?
Mr. Chair, the components of the BC model that we are actually using is the de-escalation training, not the entire use of force.
Okay.
We are mandated to use the Ontario use of force model and the training guidelines and adequacies that have been set by the province of Ontario. We added in last year, because of the trend that we're seeing, we added the de-escalation component, which was modeled after the BC model. But as far as the acronyms, Superintendent Steve Bell is right here.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the CID acronym is, but we do provide the de-escalation training that's been drawn from the CID, from the BC model.
It actually stands for Crisis Intervention and De-escalation Training Standard. They also mention specifically in de-escalation a program called Suspect Apprehension Pursuit Regulation, which requires officers to use communications and de-escalation techniques in all situations of conflict before considering force options wherever tactical and safety considerations permit. So would that be as well part of our...
Absolutely. You know, I think the first thing an officer does is, in any crisis situation, is attempt to de-escalate the situation. They do that, first of all, by their presence. Secondly, by communicating with the individual involved. So that is their primary mode, is to attempt to de-escalate the situation. And 98% of the times, they're extremely successful in de-escalating just by talking to the individual and reducing the threat or eliminating the threat. Sometimes they, under the use of force model, they have to escalate to very rapidly to potential deadly use of force, given the behaviors of, of the individual. But in the use of force model, the communication continuum is always present as the officer is assessing the behaviors and the circumstances and the events that are taking place around him or her.
They also mention what they call a dynamic judgment scenario, and I think that's what, in your answer, you're referring to a large emphasis on all live scenarios and trainings based on dealing with persons in crisis. So I'm thinking that those two are similar. One of the things that they mention there specifically is that they feel, it seems the evidence is showing that it's as important to do the debriefing after, and in many cases not sufficient time is being given to the debriefing of the officers. So I just wondered, is that something that we are aware of and are taking steps to make sure that the officers are having adequate time to debrief after the live training scenario?
Absolutely, and I go through that training myself each and every year as far as use of force, and I can tell you over the years, the scenarios have dramatically changed and adapted to the current realities of policing. And I can tell you, like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you'd go to a training scenario and you'd be expected to use force. You'd be expected to draw your gun or use your pepper spray or use your baton. Now these days, you'd never know what's going to be presented to you. You may just have an ability just to talk to the individual and they'll de-escalate right away as a result of that. So there is a mix of different scenarios that our officers are being exposed to from real-life incidents that have actually taken place in our city, dealing with either mental health issues, addictions, gunshots. So there is the variety of scenarios, and our officers, after each scenario, they get individual and group debriefs to talk about lessons learned, and the people that are participating in these scenario exercises are actually watching the scenario evolve, so they're learning from watching others at the same time.
Great. And the final thing is that they mentioned that about the eligibility criteria for use of force trainers. And they mentioned specifically that trainers too often tend to be people who are proficient in martial arts and weapons use and not necessarily skilled in communications. And I wondered, what criteria do we use for our trainers in this case? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, what I can say is to build on what the Chief said, our de-escalation training is part of our use of force training. So one of the things we look to do in screening our use of force instructors is to make sure that they have strong communication skills and that they have the ability to actually provide the de-escalation training around tactical communications. So although we do have people that are proficient in firearms and proficient in defensive tactics, they all need to be proficient in having good communication skills so that they can build that capability in all of our officers.
Thank you, Member Small. So on the item,
Mr. Chair, can I also add that certainly as president of the OECP, I met with Minister Orizetti a couple of weeks ago, and there are ongoing discussions as far as how the OECP is going to work with the ministry on dealing with the Ombudsman's report. The OECP has a use of force committee that is going to be sitting down with the ministry. We're also going to be involving the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, because the Ontario use of force model is modeled off a Canadian model, and there's certainly there's some linkages there on the national front that the province needs to be aware of. So police services across Ontario will be working with the ministry in in the implementing and looking at the Ombudsman's recommendations and enhancing and the trust and confidence that the public has in the model that is being used by our officers each and every day.
Okay, thank you, folks. And if there's no other question on the item, can we receive item 6? And you have a question, number 7, sorry. And you have a question about number 8, Member Smallwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question had been about the protocol that's used with the release of information to the media, and I want to make it clear that I certainly understand and support the fact that in certain cases, for investigative purposes, police may have to be selective in the information that they release, and I understand that. My question was more along on what basis that occurs. And I would comment that in rereading the Morden report, one of June 2012, he mentions the importance of the consultation between the police board and the chief of police with respect to certain events that can happen, and mentions about the importance of the board being aware of these policies and so that they can take whatever steps might be necessary. He specifically mentions that this consultation can happen after a particular police operation or event and will take the form of deconstructing what happened and why, and can identify valuable lessons that lead to accountability for their decisions that were made. In this case, what I just wanted to be aware of is what is the process, what are the checks and balances that are in place in the event that that you have to, for investigative purposes, alter or be selective in the information that's released to the media. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think we were clear that the media release that was issued was factual. It didn't contain any erroneous information. We used that in order to advance investigative leads and to help us solve a serious crime. The release was factual. It didn't contain any misinformation at all.
Is that it? Well, I have a question, Chief. In your response to the inquiry from Member Smallwood, I didn't see in the conclusion or in the response any reference to the Crown. And I'm sure when you folks do something like this, you have a permission from the Crown. So can you enlighten me, where is the Crown fit in that decision?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. The Crown was consulted in the preparation of that document, and they were fully supportive and of that avenue that we used.
Okay. Any other question about this item? We're good? Okay. On the item received? Did we hear received on the item? Yes. Okay. Thank you. I believe that will conclude our portion of this meeting in public, and motion to move in camera that the Ottawa Police Service Board adjourn the public portion of its meeting to move in camera to discuss confidential items pertaining to legal and personal matter in accordance with Section 35(4)(b) of the Police Service Act. Moved by Member Harder. Thank you, John.